Part 1. The Legend Begins. The 12 Labors of Heracles. In the world of ancient Greek myth, few names shine as brightly as that of Heracles, known to the Romans as Hercules. He is remembered as the strongest of all mortals, a hero whose adventures shaped the stories of countless generations. But the image we often imagine, a towering warrior defeating monsters, is only part of his truth. The 12 labors were not just feats of strength. They were a journey of redemption, punishment, and transformation. To understand the labors, we must begin with the circumstances that led Heracles down this path. Born the son of Zeus and the mortal woman Alcmene, Heracles was destined for greatness, but he was also cursed from birth. Hera, the wife of Zeus, despised the child, seeing him as a living reminder of her husband's infidelity. Her hatred followed Heracles from infancy to adulthood like a shadow. Even as a baby, he displayed unnatural strength. When Hera sent 2 serpents into his crib, the infant hero strangled them with his bare hands. As Heracles grew, so did his power. He became a warrior unmatched in skill and courage. But Hera's jealousy still burned. One day, under her influence, Heracles was struck by a divine madness. In that tragic haze, he killed his own wife, Megara, and their children. When the madness lifted, the horror of what he had done crushed him. Seeking purification and guidance, Heracles turned to the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle instructed him to serve King Eurystheus of Mycenae. Whatever tasks the king demanded, Heracles was to complete them without question. Only then would he be freed from the burden of his sins. Reluctantly, the greatest of heroes accepted the decree. Eurystheus, a petty and fearful man, saw in Heracles both a threat and an opportunity. He intended to assign tasks so impossible, so deadly, that Heracles would not survive. But fate had other plans. These challenges would become the 12 labors, a series of quests that would define Heracles not only as a warrior, but as a symbol of perseverance. Labor 1. The Nemean Lion. The first labor took Heracles to the rugged hills of Nemea, where a monstrous lion terrorized the countryside. This was no ordinary beast. Its golden fur was impenetrable, and its claws were sharper than iron blades. Villagers spoke of the lion as a creature born from the gods themselves. Heracles tracked the beast into the dense forest. When he finally confronted it, he discovered that his arrows simply bounced off its hide. Realizing that weapons were useless, he cornered the lion in a cave with 2 entrances, blocking one and charging through the other. The battle that followed was brutal and silent. No sword, no shield, only raw strength against raw fury. Heracles wrestled the lion, locking his arms around its neck. The creature thrashed wildly, but slowly its strength waned. With a final surge of power, Heracles crushed the life from the beast. Then came another challenge, skinning the lion. His knives failed, but Athena guided him, used the lion's own claws. And so he did. From that day forward, Heracles wore the lion's skin as armor, a terrifying and unmistakable symbol of invincibility. Labor 2. The Lernaean Hydra. But Eurystheus was not impressed. He demanded a task even more dangerous, the slaying of the Lernaean Hydra, a serpent-like monster lurking in the swamps near Lake Lerna. The Hydra had many heads, and its breath was poisonous enough to kill instantly. Worse still, whenever one head was cut off, 2 more grew back in its place. Heracles approached the swamp cautiously, covering his mouth and nose. The ground was thick with mist, and the air stank of decay. The Hydra emerged from its lair with a horrifying hiss, its heads striking like lightning. Heracles fought fiercely, slicing through the snapping jaws with his sword. But as quickly as he severed one head, 2 more appeared. Realizing brute force would not save him, he called upon his nephew Iolaus. As Heracles cut each head, Iolaus burned the stump with a flaming torch, preventing new heads from forming. Only the central head remained, the immortal head. Heracles severed it, placed it beneath a giant rock, and dipped his arrows in the Hydra's poisonous blood. These arrows would later shape both his victories and tragedies. Eurystheus, furious that Heracles had succeeded again, refused to count this labor, claiming he received help. But the hero continued, undeterred. Labor 3. The Ceryneian Hind. The next task seemed simple compared to the first 2, yet it required patience rather than violence. Heracles was ordered to capture, but not kill, the Ceryneian Hind, a sacred deer belonging to Artemis. This creature was no less magnificent than it was fast, with golden antlers and bronze hooves. It moved like the wind, and to harm it would bring divine punishment. Heracles spent an entire year tracking the elusive animal through forests, rivers, and mountains. He followed its hoof prints at dawn and listened for the snapping of twigs at dusk. At last, near the land of the Hyperboreans, he saw his chance. Using incredible precision, Heracles wounded the hind with a single arrow, not enough to kill it, but enough to slow it. He carried the injured animal gently, careful not to anger Artemis. When the goddess confronted him, Heracles explained his mission of atonement. Impressed by his honesty, Artemis allowed him to continue. When he returned to Mycenae with the hind, Eurystheus was enraged. He had hoped Heracles would either fail or die at the hands of the goddess. Instead, the hero stood before him unharmed, still wearing the lion's skin and holding the sacred animal with care. Labor 4. The Erymanthian Boar. Now Eurystheus gave Heracles another task based on capture rather than killing. Bring back the Erymanthian boar alive. This enormous beast roamed Mount Erymanthus, destroying farms and frightening entire villages. Heracles journeyed through snowy peaks until he reached the boar's territory. The creature was terrifying, huge, fast, and wildly aggressive. Heracles chased it through thick forests, across icy streams, and finally high into the mountains. As a winter storm began, the boar became slowed by the deep snow. Heracles seized the moment, leaping forward and binding the beast with ropes. He then dragged the struggling boar back to Mycenae. When Eurystheus saw the giant creature delivered alive, he panicked and hid inside a large storage jar, trembling with fear. Heracles stood nearby, calm and unmoved, waiting patiently for the king to emerge. Labor 5. The Augean Stables. After witnessing Heracles capture the monstrous boar with ease, Eurystheus realized that brute force alone could not defeat the hero. So he devised a labor he believed was both humiliating and impossible. Heracles was to clean the Augean stables in a single day. The stables belonged to King Augeas and held thousands of cattle. They had not been cleaned in decades, and the filth inside was so immense that the stench was said to carry for miles. Many believed this task was beneath the dignity of a hero, but Heracles accepted it without complaint. When he arrived, Augeas laughed at the idea that the great Heracles had been sent to shovel manure. But Heracles made a clever bargain. If he succeeded in one day, Augeas would reward him with a portion of his herds. Then Heracles walked around the stables, studying the terrain. Instead of trying to clean by hand, he chose a different approach. He diverted 2 powerful rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, causing their rushing waters to sweep through the stables. In a single hour, the filthy halls were washed clean. Augeas, realizing he had been outsmarted, refused to pay the promised reward and banished Heracles. But the labor was completed. Eurystheus, however, refused to count it, claiming Heracles performed the task for payment. Yet once again, the hero stood victorious. Labor 6. The Stymphalian Birds. For the sixth labor, Eurystheus sent Heracles to a remote lake near the town of Stymphalus, where a flock of monstrous birds plagued the region. These were no ordinary creatures. They had razor-sharp bronze feathers, beaks that could pierce armor, and a hunger for human flesh. The lake and its surrounding marshes were treacherous, making it nearly impossible to approach the birds directly. Heracles struggled to find a way to flush them out. But then Athena appeared, offering him a set of bronze castanets crafted by Hephaestus. Their clattering sound was unlike anything the birds had heard. Heracles climbed a hill overlooking the marsh and began shaking the castanets. The noise echoed across the water, startling the flock. The great birds burst into the sky in a frenzy, allowing Heracles to shoot them down with his arrows, now tipped with hydra poison. Those that survived fled far away, never to return. Villages around Stymphalus were freed from terror, and Heracles continued his journey. Labor 7. The Cretan Bull. Eurystheus's next command sent Heracles across the sea to the island of Crete. There he was to capture the Cretan bull, a magnificent yet wild creature that breathed fire and trampled crops. This bull had once been a gift from Poseidon, meant for King Minos to sacrifice, but Minos kept it for himself, angering the god. Since then, the beast had brought chaos to the island. Heracles arrived in Crete and received permission from Minos to subdue the bull. Tracking the animal across open fields and rocky hills, the hero confronted it in a dramatic chase. The bull snorted smoke, its eyes burning with fury. But Heracles, stronger and faster, seized its horns and wrestled it to the ground. Using sheer strength, he forced the bull into submission, then tied it and carried it across the sea back to Greece. Eurystheus, terrified at the sight of the flaming beast, ordered that it be released into the wild rather than brought near the city. The Cretan bull would later appear again in another famous myth, that of Theseus. Labor 8. The Mares of Diomedes. The eighth labor required Heracles to travel to Thrace to capture the man-eating mares of King Diomedes. These fearsome horses were fed human flesh and were known for their uncontrollable rage. Their chains were made of iron, and their stables were guarded day and night. Heracles and his companions landed on the Thracian shore under cover of darkness. But when they attempted to seize the mares, Diomedes and his men attacked. A battle erupted across the coastline. Heracles fought fiercely and overpowered the king. Then he understood the secret behind the horses' madness. They had been driven insane by the brutal diet Diomedes forced upon them. So Heracles fed the tyrant to his own animals. Once they consumed their master, the mares grew calm. Heracles tied them together and brought them back to Eurystheus. The king, as usual, wanted nothing to do with such dangerous creatures and dedicated them to the gods instead. Labor 9. The Belt of Hippolyta. Heracles' ninth labor was unlike the others. This quest involved diplomacy, or at least so Eurystheus hoped. His daughter, Admete, desired the golden belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. This belt was a symbol of royal authority and a gift from Ares himself. Heracles assembled a group of companions and sailed across the Black Sea to the land of the Amazons. To his surprise, Hippolyta greeted him peacefully. She admired Heracles' courage and agreed to give him the belt willingly. But Hera, unwilling to let Heracles succeed so easily, disguised herself as an Amazon warrior and spread a terrible rumor. that Heracles had come to kidnap their queen. The Amazons, thinking Hippolyta was in danger, charged toward the Greek camp. A fierce battle followed. In the chaos, Hippolyta was killed. Heracles, devastated but determined to complete his mission, took the belt and sailed home. Eurystheus accepted the prize without a word of gratitude. Labor 10. The Cattle of Geryon. For the 10th labor, Heracles had to travel farther than ever before, to the edge of the world, to the land where the giant Geryon lived. Geryon was a monstrous being with 3 bodies joined at the waist, and he guarded a herd of magnificent red cattle. To reach this distant land, Heracles journeyed across North Africa. There, overwhelmed by the heat, he shot an arrow at the sun itself. Instead of punishing him, the sun god Helios admired the hero's boldness and granted him a golden cup to sail across the ocean. When Heracles arrived, he faced not only Geryon, but also the giant herdsman Eurytion and a massive 2-headed dog named Orthrus. Heracles slew the guardians and confronted Geryon in a battle that shook the earth. With a single poisoned arrow, he brought the giant down. Driving the cattle back to Greece was an adventure on its own. Bandits tried to steal them, storms scattered them, and Hera sent flies to torment the herd. But Heracles pushed onward and delivered the cattle to Eurystheus, who promptly sacrificed them to Hera. Labor 11. The Apples of the Hesperides. The 11th labor brought Heracles closer than ever to the realm of the divine. This time, his task was to retrieve the golden apples of the Hesperides. These apples were not ordinary fruit. They were sacred gifts to Hera. Grown on a magical tree guarded by the Hesperides, the nymphs of the west, and by a monstrous dragon named Ladon, whose 100 heads never slept. But Heracles didn't know where the garden was located. It was hidden at the very edge of the world, and no mortal was meant to reach it. So he began a long and wandering journey across continents, seeking clues from anyone who might know. He first visited the nymphs of the river Eridanus, who explained that only one being knew the location of the garden: the Titan Prometheus, chained to a mountain for stealing fire from the gods. Heracles climbed the desolate peak where Prometheus endured his eternal torment. Every day, an eagle tore at his liver. Every night, it grew back. Moved by the Titan's suffering, Heracles killed the eagle with a single arrow. In gratitude, Prometheus told him that the only way to obtain the golden apples was to seek out Atlas, the Titan condemned to hold the sky on his shoulders. Heracles found Atlas at the westernmost edge of the earth, standing beneath the crushing weight of the heavens. Atlas agreed to retrieve the apples for him, but only if Heracles would take his burden temporarily. And so, for the first and only time, Heracles became the bearer of the heavens. Atlas lifted the sky from his shoulders and disappeared toward the garden. Time passed slowly. Heracles held firm, his feet dug into the earth, his muscles straining against the weight of the cosmos. Finally, Atlas returned with 3 golden apples, gleaming like miniature suns. But the Titan had no intention of resuming his punishment. He told Heracles he would deliver the apples to Eurystheus himself and leave the hero to hold the sky forever. Heracles saw through the deception. With calm politeness, he asked Atlas to take the sky just for a moment so he could adjust his cloak for better support. Atlas, not expecting a trick, agreed. As soon as the heavens were back on the Titan's shoulders, Heracles took the apples and walked away without another word. He returned the golden fruit to Eurystheus, but since the apples belonged to the gods, they were ultimately returned to Athena, who brought them back to the sacred garden. Labor 12. Cerberus, guardian of the underworld. At last came the 12th and final labor, the most dangerous of all. Eurystheus commanded Heracles to descend into the underworld and bring back Cerberus, the monstrous hound of Hades. Cerberus was a terrifying creature, a giant dog with 3 heads, a serpent for a tail, and venomous snakes writhing along his spine. No mortal had ever faced the beast and lived. Before entering the realm of the dead, Heracles sought purification at the Eleusinian mysteries, sacred rites that granted him safe passage into the underworld. Then he walked to the entrance of Hades, passing through dark caverns where no sunlight could reach. The underworld was vast and chilling. Spirits drifted like shadows, whispering their sorrows. Heracles met shades of heroes long dead, including Theseus, whom he freed from eternal imprisonment. He crossed the river Styx, guided by Hermes, and eventually reached the throne of Hades and Persephone. Heracles did not draw his weapon. He bowed respectfully and asked permission to take Cerberus to the world above, on the condition that he capture the beast without using any iron or edged tools. Hades agreed, impressed by Heracles' courage. Heracles walked toward the gates of the underworld, where Cerberus stood chained to the cavern floor. The beast snarled, its 3 heads snapping, its serpent tail lashing with fury. The air was thick with the stench of death. With nothing but his bare hands, Heracles confronted the monstrous hound. Cerberus lunged. Heracles grabbed the central head, then the others, wrestling the creature with all his might. The serpent tail struck at him repeatedly, but he held fast. Slowly, through sheer strength and unbreakable will, Heracles subdued the guardian of the dead. He dragged Cerberus back through the cavern passage, up through the darkness, until at last he emerged into the sunlight. People fled in terror at the sight of the monstrous hound, but Heracles remained calm, holding the creature firmly. When Eurystheus saw Cerberus, he screamed in fear and begged Heracles to take the beast back immediately. Laughing softly, Heracles did as commanded, returning Cerberus unharmed to the realm of Hades. The 12 labors were complete. After the labors, the hero's final fate. Having completed the impossible, Heracles was finally cleansed of his sins. His legend spread across Greece and beyond. Yet his life was far from peaceful. The poisoned blood of the Hydra, which he had once used as a weapon, would one day return to seal his fate. But his suffering did not end in tragedy. According to myth, Heracles' mortal body perished, but his divine spirit ascended to Olympus. There he became a god, honored, revered, and granted immortality. He married Hebe, the goddess of youth, and lived among the Olympians for eternity. The 12 labors transformed Heracles from a mortal weighed down by guilt into a symbol of perseverance, courage, and resilience. His journey was more than a list of heroic feats. It was a testament to the human spirit, how one can rise from the darkest moments, face the impossible, and emerge stronger than ever. The boy who was promised a kingdom. Imagine a quiet morning in ancient Troezen, a small city on the Peloponnesian coast. The sun rises slowly over the distant mountains, touching the tiled roofs with a soft golden glow. Fishermen are already returning from the sea, pulling their boats onto the sand. Children run barefoot along the streets. And among them, unnoticed, walks a young boy, serious, thoughtful, far more focused than a child his age should be. His name is Theseus. He is being raised by his mother, Aethra, daughter of the king of Troezen. But what few people know is that Theseus is not just another noble child. He is the son of Aegeus, king of Athens, although the boy himself does not yet know this fully. Aegeus, before leaving Troezen many years earlier, hid a sword and a pair of sandals beneath a large stone. He told Aethra that only when their son grew strong enough to lift that stone should he learn the truth about his lineage. And so Aethra raised the boy quietly, letting him grow not with luxury or pride, but with discipline and strength. Theseus learned to hunt in the forests. He learned to wrestle, to run, to endure long journeys without complaint. He learned to sit still in silence, to listen before speaking, and to observe before acting. People often whispered that there was something heroic in his gaze, some mixture of confidence and calm that didn't come from childhood but from destiny. Theseus himself felt it too. He did not yet understand who he would become, but he sensed that his life would not be like the lives of ordinary men. The stone and the truth. Everything changed on a quiet morning when Theseus turned 16. Aethra brought him to the edge of a small grove just outside the city. In the center of the clearing lay a massive stone flat, wide and half buried in the earth. Moss grew along its edges. The boy had passed by it countless times without ever giving it special attention. But this time, his mother stopped. "Theseus," she said softly, "it is time." He didn't need more explanation. Something in her voice made his heart beat faster. He approached the stone, placed his fingers beneath the edge, and inhaled deeply. Muscles tightened beneath his skin. The earth shifted under his feet, and slowly, steadily, he lifted the stone. Dust filled the air. The moss tore away, and beneath it, wrapped in old cloth, lay a sword and a pair of sandals. Aethra's eyes filled with quiet pride. "These," she said, "belong to your father, Aegeus, king of Athens." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Theseus stared at the sword, running his fingers along the worn grip. It was not just a weapon. It was a legacy, a promise, proof of who he truly was. Aethra continued, "When you are ready, you must go to Athens. Your father awaits a son worthy of taking his place." Theseus nodded. He felt no fear, only purpose. He tied the sandals to his feet and belted the sword at his hip. The moment he stood again, he seemed taller, stronger, older. He was no longer just a boy from Troezen. He was the heir of Athens. The choice of the road to reach Athens, Theseus had two options. The sea road safe, short, and commonly used by nobles. The land road dangerous, long, and plagued by bandits and criminals. Everyone expected him to take the sea route. Even the king of Troezen urged it, afraid to risk the young man's life. But Theseus refused. "If I am to be the son of a king," he said, "then I must also protect those who cannot protect themselves. I will take the land road and cleanse it of all who threaten the innocent." And so he left Troezen on foot, without guards, without companions, without a chariot. Only a sword, a pack over his shoulder, and the determination to become worthy of the father he had never met. The land road was a test of heroes, and Theseus intended to pass it. The road of monsters and men. The journey from Troezen to Athens was no peaceful walk. For years, the route had been terrorized by notorious criminals and monstrous killers. Travelers avoided the region, merchants paid heavy fees to hire armed escorts, and entire villages lived in fear. But Theseus stepped onto the dusty road with calm determination. Not far from Troezen, he encountered the first of many dangers, a towering bandit named Periphetes, known as the Club-Bearer. Periphetes wielded a massive bronze club with terrifying strength. Most men fled at the sight of him. Theseus did not flee. The bandit roared and charged. The young hero dodged the first swing, the second, and the third. He moved lightly, almost like a dancer. Finally, with a burst of speed, He closed the distance and struck hard, knocking the giant to the ground. Theseus lifted the fallen club in his hands. It was heavy, far heavier than it looked, but he raised it with ease. From that moment, he carried the club as a symbol. He would confront brutality with greater strength and with justice. But Periphetes was only the beginning. Farther along the road lived Sinis, the pine bender, who killed travelers by tying them to bent trees. Then came Siren, who kicked victims into the sea to be devoured by a giant turtle. After him, the wrestler Cercyon, who forced strangers into deadly competitions. And lastly, Procrustes, the bedkeeper, who stretched or cut his victims to make them fit his iron bed. Theseus defeated each of them, not just with strength, but with cunning and resolve. Where others brought terror, he brought justice. Where others tortured the weak, he defended them. Where others ruled through fear, he answered with courage. By the time he neared Athens, word of a young hero cleansing the roads had spread across the entire region. Some called him a savior, others called him a fool, but all agreed on one thing: a new legend was rising. Approaching the city of his father, as Athens finally came into view, its walls tall, its temples gleaming beneath the sun, Theseus felt something shift in his chest. This was not just the end of a journey. This was the beginning of his true life. He had earned the right to present himself before Aegeus. He had earned the right to carry the sword. He had earned the right to stand among heroes. But he did not know that in Athens, danger waited for him: two political schemes, jealous rivals, hidden assassins, and a queen who wanted him dead. His trials on the road were over. His trials among men were only beginning. The Prince Who Walked in Shadows. When Theseus entered Athens, he did not announce himself as the son of King Aegeus. He walked through the city as a traveler, observing everything with the sharp, calm gaze of a man who has already faced death more than once. Athens was magnificent, larger, wealthier, and far more complex than Troezen. Marble temples shone on the Acropolis. Markets overflowed with spices, clay lamps, bronze weapons, and colorful fabrics. Philosophers argued in the shade of olive trees, while fishermen shouted prices near the docks. But beneath all this beauty, Theseus sensed tension whispers, nervous glances, conversations that stopped when strangers came near. Athens was a city troubled, and at its center stood the man Theseus had come to find, King Aegeus. Yet the king was not alone. Beside him stood a woman with cold eyes and a calculating mind, Medea, the sorceress, the same Medea who had once traveled with Jason. She had come to Athens seeking refuge, but she had also found influence. She whispered in Aegeus's ear, guided his decisions, and slowly tightened her grip on the throne. And she sensed immediately that the newcomer, this young, strong, fearless stranger, was dangerous. The dangerous guest. Theseus entered the palace quietly. He was just another traveler asking for audience with the king. Aegeus welcomed him kindly. He was known for his hospitality, but Medea watched him with narrowed eyes. She studied his posture, the sword at his hip, the sandals on his feet. She recognized the symbols long before Aegeus did, and she knew the truth. This young man was the king's son, a threat to her power, a danger to everything she planned. Medea's mind moved quickly, like a storm forming behind calm skies. She approached Aegeus when Theseus could not hear. "That stranger is not what he pretends to be," she whispered. "He is dangerous. He means to overthrow you. You must not let him stay alive." Aegeus hesitated. He saw no threat in the traveler, only a polite and disciplined young man. But Medea's influence was strong, and her warnings filled him with fear. She proposed a test, a cruel one. "Invite him to a feast," she said, "and let him drink from a cup of wine I prepare for him." Aegeus did not know her intentions, but he agreed, and so a feast was arranged. Theseus sat near the king, unaware that the cup set before him glistened with a deadly poison. The reveal, just as Theseus reached for the cup, Aegeus saw something, a familiar shape. The sword on Theseus's hip caught the light of a nearby torch, and the king froze. He knew that sword. He had hidden that sword. It was the one he left beneath the stone in Troezen. Aegeus leapt from his throne, knocking the poisoned cup from Theseus's hand. The wine spilled across the floor. Medea's plan shattered. The truth filled the king's eyes with emotion he had not known in years. "My son," he whispered, "are you truly my son?" Theseus bowed his head. "I am Theseus of Troezen, son of Aethra, and of you." Aegeus embraced him, tears in his eyes. The entire court watched in awe. The long-lost prince had returned. Medea, seeing that her scheme had failed, fled the palace immediately. No guards dared stop her. No one wanted to confront the witch, whose anger was legendary. Athens now had a rightful heir, and the people rejoiced. But celebration in Athens never lasted long. Trouble was brewing. The shadow of Minos. For many years, Athens lived under the shadow of a powerful enemy, the island kingdom of Crete, ruled by King Minos. After a long and bitter war, Athens had been forced into a humiliating agreement. Every 9 years, 7 Athenian boys and 7 Athenian girls were sent to Crete as tribute. There, they were thrown into the dark labyrinth beneath Minos's palace to be devoured by his monstrous son, the Minotaur, half man, half bull. It was a punishment meant to remind Athens of its defeat. It was a wound that never healed. And the time for the next tribute had come. When Theseus learned this, his blood turned to fire. "How can Athenians live with this disgrace?" he demanded. "How can we send our children to die in darkness?" Aegeus lowered his head. "I have no choice," he said. "If we refuse, Minos will bring war again. And this time, Athens will not survive." Theseus stood tall. "Then I will go with the youths, and I will end this tribute forever." The court erupted in chaos. Nobles shouted. Mothers cried. Aegeus begged his son to reconsider. But Theseus had already made his decision. "I faced monsters on the road," he said. "I can face one more in a labyrinth." No one could change his mind. The departure. The day the chosen youths marched through the streets of Athens was one of the darkest in the city's history. People lined the roads, silent and pale, watching their children walk toward the ships that would take them to Crete. But this time, they were not led by fear. They were led by a prince. Theseus walked at the front of the group. Calm, tall, his father's sword at his side. His presence filled the people with a strange mix of sorrow and hope. For the first time in years, they believed that perhaps the tribute would end. Perhaps this would be the last time their children climbed aboard those ships. Aegeus met his son at the harbor. His hands trembled. "My son," he said, "if you return alive, raise a white sail. If you do not, your ship will return with a black one." Theseus placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "I will return, father, and I will free Athens." The wind carried the ships across the Aegean Sea, their black sails billowing like wings of morning. The horizon swallowed them slowly, leaving Aegeus alone on the dock, watching until the last shadow disappeared beyond the waves. He did not know it then, but that moment would become one of the most tragic memories in Greek legend. The journey to Crete. On the ship, Theseus prepared. He trained with the boys, encouraged the girls, kept their spirits alive. They were no longer victims. They were companions in a mission greater than themselves. Days passed. Waves rose and fell. Stars guided their ship across the dark waters. At night, Theseus stood alone on deck, staring at the distant lights of Crete as they grew closer. He knew that somewhere on that island awaited a labyrinth, an endless maze built by the genius of Daedalus. And at its center, breathing, waiting, hungry, the Minotaur. Theseus felt no fear, only purpose. Athens had sent him to die. He intended to return victorious. The Labyrinth and the Princess. The ships from Athens reached Crete at sunrise. The water gleamed gold, the air smelled of warm sea salt, and the harbor buzzed with the disciplined order of a powerful kingdom. Unlike Athens, which carried the scars of war, Crete was thriving, its palaces decorated with bright frescoes, its markets crowded, its people confident. But beneath all its beauty lay a quiet cruelty. The cruelty of a king who fed innocent youths to a monster. Theseus stepped onto the stone docks with the other Athenian youths behind him. His face was calm, but his mind was sharp and alert. Somewhere inside this island, inside a maze of twisting stone corridors, awaited the enemy he had come to defeat. The guards in Crete did not bother hiding their disdain. The Athenians were not guests. They were tribute. They were property. They were prey. And leading them through the palace gates was a man of immense authority, King Minos himself. Minos looked at Theseus with amusement, almost mockingly. "So," he said with a cold smile, "you are the Athenian prince who believes he can defy fate." Theseus did not look away. "I believe," he answered, "that your monster's time is over." Minos laughed loudly, cruelly. "Bravery is common among those who die young," he said, and he turned away. But someone else had seen Theseus, someone whose life was about to change forever. Ariadne, the princess of Crete. In the shadows of the palace courtyard stood Ariadne, the daughter of Minos. She was young, intelligent, and far more compassionate than her father. She watched the Athenians being led away and felt her heart tighten with pain. But when she saw Theseus, something shifted within her. He did not look broken like the others. He did not walk with fear. He walked with purpose, a quiet fire in his eyes. Ariadne could not look away. Later that evening, when the palace had grown quiet and the moonlight spilled across the marble floors, Ariadne sought out the Athenian prince. She found him in the courtyard, alone, staring up at the sky. She stepped forward timidly. "You are Theseus," she said. He turned, surprised but respectful. "Yes, and you are the princess of Crete." Ariadne hesitated, lowering her voice. "Do you truly mean to enter the labyrinth? Do you truly mean to face him? The Minotaur?" Theseus nodded. "I will not allow Athens to suffer this tribute again." Ariadne took a breath. "There is something you must understand," she whispered. "No one who enters the labyrinth ever returns, not because they are weak, but because the labyrinth itself is alive. It twists, shifts, confuses the mind. Even if you escape the monster, you will starve in the endless corridors." Theseus stepped closer. "Then tell me," he said quietly, "how to survive." Ariadne hesitated, torn between loyalty to her father and a rising feeling that she could not explain. Something in Theseus, his courage, his calm strength, his sense of justice, pulled at her. She made her decision. "I will help you." The thread and the sword Ariadne led Theseus to a secret chamber in the palace. There, hidden beneath embroidered cloths, was a simple wooden spool wound with fine, strong thread. "This is the work of Daedalus," she said softly, "the man who built the labyrinth. Use the thread to mark your path. Let it guide you back to the entrance." Theseus took the spool gently. "A lifeline," he murmured. "A way home." Ariadne nodded. "But that alone will not save you. Take also this blade." She handed him a short sword, sharper than any he had carried before. "It is light, but strong. You will need it." Theseus looked at her with gratitude. "You risk everything by helping me," he said. "Why?" Ariadne looked down, her cheeks warming. "Because I believe in you," she whispered. "And because I cannot bear the thought of another innocent dying in that darkness." Theseus placed a hand over hers. "Your courage matches any hero's," he said. "Whatever happens, I will not forget your kindness." Her heart lifted at his words. Ariadne knew that at dawn Theseus would walk to his death, and yet she also knew he would fight harder than anyone before him. Entering the labyrinth. The next morning, as the sun rose red across the sea, the Athenians were led to a massive bronze door in the side of the palace complex. Its surface was carved with spirals, bulls, and dancing shapes symbols of Crete's power. Behind those doors lay the labyrinth. Minos watched with satisfaction as the youths were assembled. But Theseus stepped forward before the doors opened. "I ask only one thing," he said boldly, "that I be the first to enter." Minos narrowed his eyes, but signaled the guards. "Let the Prince of Athens go first," he said mockingly, "so that the monster may enjoy a worthy meal." The bronze doors groaned open. A cold, damp wind drifted out, carrying the distant echo of something breathing deep within the maze. Theseus looked back one last time. Ariadne was there. Her eyes were full of fear and hope. He nodded to her, tied one end of the thread to the entrance, and stepped into the darkness. The doors slammed shut behind him. The living maze. Inside, the air was thick and cold. Moisture dripped from the stone walls. The floor was smooth and worn evidence of centuries of wandering feet. Theseus unrolled the thread slowly as he walked, letting it trail behind him. Every corner led to another corridor. Every corridor led to a dead end, or a staircase, or another turning. The labyrinth was a puzzle, but Theseus was patient. He moved silently, listening for any sign of movement. At times, he thought he heard breathing slow, heavy, animal-like. At other times, he heard the scrape of claws on stone. But the Minotaur did not appear. Hours passed, the darkness thickened, but Theseus's resolve did not break. Finally, in a wide chamber deep within the maze, he found what he had come for. The Minotaur. The creature stood taller than any man Theseus had ever seen. Its shoulders were massive, its chest thick and muscular. Its head was that of a bull broad, horned, and steaming with hot breath. Its eyes glowed with a terrible hunger. The Minotaur bellowed, a sound so deep it shook the very walls of the labyrinth. Theseus held his ground. The monster charged. Stone cracked beneath its hooves as it thundered forward. Theseus dodged to the side, rolling across the ground as the creature slammed into a pillar, shattering it instantly. The fight began. The battle in the dark. Theseus moved fast, circling the monster, striking when he saw an opening. But the Minotaur was powerful beyond anything he had ever faced. Each swipe of its claws could have torn him in half. Each kick could have crushed his bones. Still, he fought on. The creature lunged. Theseus jumped aside. It swung its horns. Theseus ducked beneath the arc. It roared. Theseus drove his blade forward. The sword cut deep into the Minotaur's side. Blood spilled onto the stone. But the monster only grew angrier. It charged again. Theseus waited, waited, waited. Then, at the last second, he stepped aside, grabbed one of the great horns, and used the monster's momentum to pull its head downward. The Minotaur stumbled, exposing its throat. Theseus struck. The blade sank deep. The monster roared a final time, a sound of pain, rage, and freedom, and collapsed onto the stone floor. The labyrinth fell silent. The Minotaur was dead. The way out, breathing heavily, covered in sweat and dust, Theseus found the thread and followed it back through the twisting corridors. Every step felt like a victory. Every turn brought him closer to freedom. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the bronze doors. He pushed. The doors opened. Ariadne was standing there, tears in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. Theseus nodded. "It's over," he said. He took her hand. "Come with us. Let us leave this place together." And so they fled Crete before the palace guards could discover what had happened. The Athenians boarded their ships. Ariadne joined them. The wind rose behind them. For the first time in many years, the ships of Athens sailed with hope. The return, the tragedy, and the king. The ships of Athens cut across the waves under the cloak of night. The moon glimmered on the surface of the sea, lighting the path home. For the first time in years, the young Athenians aboard these vessels felt hope instead of dread. The Minotaur was dead. The tribute was ended. Athens would never again send its children to die in darkness. But the journey home would not be as simple as a triumphant sail across calm waters. Fate had one more twist waiting for Theseus I that would mark his life forever. The island of Naxos. After many hours at sea, the Athenian ships reached a quiet island Naxos. Exhausted and still shaken from their ordeal in Crete, the youths begged for rest. Theseus agreed. The island was peaceful, its beaches bright with soft sand, its forests alive with birdsong. It was the perfect place to recover. Ariadne, too, needed rest. She had risked everything, her family, her home, her entire life, to help Theseus. And now she stood with him on the shore, watching the waves, believing that their journey together had only just begun. That night, they celebrated their victory around a small fire. They sang, laughed, and embraced the relief of survival. Later, when the stars blanketed the sky, Ariadne fell asleep beside Theseus. And then, the story splits. Some say a god intervened. Others say destiny simply demanded its due. But all versions agree on one thing. Theseus left Naxos without Ariadne. The abandonment of Ariadne, when dawn rose, Ariadne awoke alone on the sand. The ships were already far on the horizon, mere shadows against the morning sea. Her heart broke in an instant, shattered by the realization that Theseus was gone. Why did he leave her? There are many myths, each telling a different answer. Some say Dionysus, the god of wine, appeared to Theseus in a dream and ordered him to leave Ariadne, for she was destined to become the god's wife. Others say Theseus simply forgot her in the chaos and exhaustion of the journey. And some darker versions say he abandoned her willingly, fearing her connection to Crete, or doubting their future. Whatever the truth, Ariadne's tears fell into the sand as the ships disappeared from sight. But the gods were not blind. According to legend, Dionysus himself found her and lifted her from despair. He made her his immortal bride, placing her crown among the stars where it shines even today. Ariadne's story did not end in sorrow, but it would forever haunt Theseus. The Forgotten Sails. As the ships approached Athens, Theseus stood at the prow, his mind heavy with the trials he had faced. He had killed a monster, ended a cruel tribute, saved a generation of Athenian youth. But he carried guilt. Guilt for Ariadne, guilt for the lives lost before him, guilt for what awaited when he reached home. In his grief and exhaustion, he forgot one crucial promise. Before Theseus left for Crete, his father Aegeus had said, "If you return alive, raise a white sail. If you perish, the ship shall return with a black one." Theseus had fully intended to raise the white sail, but in the chaos of the journey, he forgot. The ships approached Athens, still bearing the black sails of death. The king's despair, King Aegeus waited every day on the cliffs overlooking the sea, scanning the horizon for his son's return. His heart lived in a state between dread and desperate hope. When the ships finally appeared, the king saw the black sails. His heart collapsed. Believing his son dead, Aegeus stepped toward the edge of the cliffs. The waves crashed far below as the king whispered to the wind, "Farewell, my son." And he leapt into the sea. The waters that claimed him would forever bear his name, the Aegean Sea. Theseus returns. When the ships docked, the cheers of the Athenians quickly turned to cries of mourning. Theseus rushed ashore, confused and horrified when he saw the distraught crowds. "What has happened?" he shouted. A trembling elder approached him. "The king," the man said, "your father, is gone." The truth hit Theseus like a spear to the heart. A single forgotten sail had cost him everything: his father, his peace, his joy. The victorious hero returned not to celebration, but to tragedy. Theseus tore the black sail from the mast with his own hands, but it was too late. Nothing could undo the horrible mistake. He was king now, but he would wear the crown with a heavy heart. The kingship of Theseus. Though grief marked the beginning of his rule, Theseus devoted himself to Athens with unmatched dedication. He believed that true kingship meant service, justice, and unity. And so he transformed Athens. He united Attica. Theseus brought together scattered villages and communities, forging them into a single people. Before him, Athens was a region of rival towns. After him, it became a nation. He established democracy, not the full democracy of later years, but its foundation. He limited his own power, allowing people to participate in decisions. He created assemblies, councils, and civic structures that shaped future Greek politics. He created the festivals Theseus established, the Panathenaic Games, athletic contests and celebrations that united the people in honor of Athena. He became a symbol. Athenians looked to him as the ideal hero, courageous, selfless, wise, and just. But his life was not without hardship. The death of his father, the memory of Ariadne, the weight of leadership, these burdens shaped the man behind the hero's legend. The final years, as time passed, Theseus faced new challenges: political rivals, personal losses, and shifting alliances. His later years were marked by conflict and betrayal. Eventually, he was driven into exile by political enemies seeking power. He spent his final days on the island of Skyros, where the king of the island, fearing Theseus's influence, tricked him into walking off a cliff. And so, the great hero who had once overcome the labyrinth met his end at the edge of another precipice. But Athens never forgot him. Statues were raised, temples were built, songs were sung. Theseus became more than a man. He became a legend, a symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the complex, tragic nature of heroism itself.